So if a network achieves a particular position of dominance, what enables it to maintain that dominance over time? Well, I like to think of concrete that is curing once it has been poured. Well, it has to be exposed to the right temperature conditions and the right amount of moisture, which allows it to compress and harden in the following weeks. Well, the same thing kind of applies to networks in that there are certain conditions or elements that allow or enable them to strengthen over time. One of the most obvious ones when we're talking about digital networks is Moore's Law. Now, Gordon Moore made this particular observation in, I believe, the 60s, maybe the early 70s, that the number of transistors that could fit on a computer chip was doubling roughly every 2 years. Now, what did that mean? It meant that computer chips could be denser, and it meant that the cost of compute was likely to trend down exponentially for the foreseeable future. And the question we have to answer is, does the deflationary force of technology enable a particular network to scale or expand over time? So think of the proliferation of smartphones. Without the explosive growth in the number of devices worldwide and the cost of those devices trending downwards, would something like Twitter ever reach the magnitude that it did? Would it have, hit escape velocity in the time period that it did? Probably not. And the similar thing applies to Bitcoin. Can we expect that the hardware components required to run a full node or even interact with the network via a full node using any other device, are the components required to do that going to become cheaper and more ubiquitous over time? Here is a graphical representation of Moore's Law, and it illustrates the historical cost of compute and storage over the last 70 odd years. And two things to note. Firstly, this is in log scale. Secondly, it's not even adjusted for inflation, which is insane to think about. Imagine if it was measured in a hard money that wasn't designed to inflate 2% per year at best. The next chart I want to look at, this is taken from a report by BlackRock looking at the adoption rate of various technologies in the US. You've probably seen something similar, but what I want to bring your attention to is these yellow lines, which represent personal computers, cell phones, and the internet. This particular group of technologies and networks, they kind of explode and go vertical in the 90s. And it would be very difficult to argue that Moore's Law didn't play a significant role in that. The next point to consider is that of attack surface. So if we're thinking about network design, and we covered a number of different attributes or characteristics you'd want to keep in mind when designing a network, well, if your network's likely to be in the crosshairs of incumbents, governments, or just very motivated users wanting to break things, well, you have to consider all the gaps in armor that exist. And you want to design your network in a way that minimizes or eliminates all the potential gaps. And a key factor in Bitcoin's resilience has been the simplicity of the core protocol, coupled with the high level of public scrutiny it gets because it's an open source project. Michael Saylor highlights this really well. He says, if I'm indestructible, I don't have to be the fastest, the shiniest, I just have to be indestructible. If you're an open source protocol, someone's going to code an extension to give you every other cool power anybody wants. And guys, this is what most people miss when they're looking at various competitors to Bitcoin. If you're optimizing for transaction speeds or any other kind of attribute, but you're not prioritizing survivability or indestructibility, well, you can kind of see how it's going to end. Satoshi Nakamoto understood this problem very well, and Satoshi said, being open source means anyone can independently review the code. If it was closed source, nobody could verify the security. And we'll leave it at that.